Brought to you by the Every Dollar app. Start budgeting for free today.
So here we are. We're going to talk about the interest rates, George. The Fed, right? Jerome Powell. I've been mean about Jerome before. I have criticized Jerome in the past, and I don't want to criticize him today, but I want to point out that he is the chairman of the Fed.
The Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve. So here's the deal. Everybody's going, what is he going to do with interest rates? What's he going to do with interest rates? A lot of people predicting. They passed on the last meeting. They didn't do anything. A lot of people predicting quarter 3, quarter 4, and it affects the debt situation that people are borrowing. So I'll throw it to you, George. The credit card. When people are looking, they're hoping, okay, if he drops it, maybe I don't have to pay as much. But guys like you and me, one of the great positives of the Fed raising the rate is we save more money.
That's true. When the Fed lowers the rate, it makes borrowing money cheaper. When they raise the rate, it makes borrowing money more expensive. Now, on the flip side, when you think about a savings account, we've also seen savings rates go up with borrowing rates go up. So if you are saving money, this is a great thing for you. If you've got $10,000 in a savings account that's growing at 5% instead of 2%, you're happy about that.
That's right.
But if your car loan is now 8% instead of 5%, you're upset about it. So for those trying to borrow money actively, this hurts them. But guess what? Consumers have been borrowing money anyways, Ken, because we've seen the consumer numbers go up for debt.
It's not changing at all.
We've seen inflation not cool at the rate they want to because largely consumers are it's still white hot. People are still spending money. They're still borrowing money, which is kind of hurting the very thing they're wanting, which is inflation to cool.
That's right. So the correlation between the Fed raising interest rates and how it affects mortgage rates is those are the bond rates. So it's the bond rates. And so when the bond rate changes, it does have an indirect effect on mortgage rates.
It's an inverse relationship.
Inverse, but he's not directly, when he's moving, it doesn't automatically mean your mortgage provider or anybody else is going to change their rate, but it has to do with that. Now, here's some other things we just want to kind of explain. How does it affect you? One of the biggies is employment. Jerome Powell came out a year and a half, 2 years ago and said, we're going to start to raise rates because we've got to cool inflation. And the way they try to cool inflation is raising the rate, which it does it in two ways.
Makes it harder to borrow.
But what happens is that companies, because a lot of companies are using debt for operating expenses or some type of leveraging, around goods and services, then what will happen is they start to cut costs because their borrowing costs went up. And so they'll cut costs by dropping employees. So layoffs, okay? That's a big one. The other thing you got to think about too is they want to see unemployment go up in high times of inflation. And he said this because people spend less. And we are a consumer-driven economy, George. We're not a manufacturing-driven economy. We're a consumer-driven economy. In other words, we're all just passing each other's money around. That is the American economy.
And you need that to happen in order to keep this whole thing going.
So when people stop spending, guess what happens? Companies aren't making as much money.
Slows it down.
They lay it off. So those are the two factors that when you see interest rates go up, usually you see unemployment go up. When you see interest rates come down, again, unemployment tends to drop as well. So that's what's going on. The inflation itself, costs in goods and services across the board. The housing market, tremendously affected.
That's the big one. As people are clamoring about, is if we can get these rates down, more people, that we can get the housing market sort of stimulated again, because it's been pretty stagnant lately.
All right. So here's why we bring this up. Just as we took a call to start the show, how can I recession-proof my career? You want to recession-proof your life, and you want to make sure that whatever Jerome Powell does and the Fed, it doesn't affect you that much.
Because if you're trying to borrow out your eyeballs, then it affects you.
That's right.
Because every rate, every turn, the car loan, the credit card, the student loan, the mortgage, it all affects you. But when you go, you know what, I'm not going to play the game.
That's right.
I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to pay off the house.
That's right.
Well, then the rates, you go, yawn.
Well,
what else is on TV?
That's what happens to you and me right now. The only thing I get irritated about on the rates is when I'm like, oh, my savings rate just dropped.
And that's what we're going to see happen. If you have a savings account, what's likely going to happen, you're going to go, oh, it went from 5 to 4.75.
Yeah. By the way, real quick point on this, because this plays into what you teach and Dave teaches on investing. Earlier this week, we saw a massive stock drop, right? It was the Dow lost over 1,000 points. NASDAQ was probably, 500 points off, something like that. Anyway, point is people were panicking, and one of the lead economists in this country came out and called for an emergency rate drop.
Wow.
Well, the Fed must have yawned and ignored him. It didn't happen. I thought that was a crazy reaction.
They don't just go, well, one economist said it, Ken. We have to do it.
They don't. But
They
2 days
called for
later,
it.
same economist came out because the market has already rebounded. Largely got it all back. The next day, 650 up, and I don't know what it's done today. My point is, this is the roller coaster that you talk about.
So if I lost cell phone service for 2 days, I would have come back and go, what happened? Oh, nothing. We're back to where we were.
Essentially.
Big whoop.
Not point for point, but pretty darn close. So all that to say, I do expect the Fed to drop the rate probably in the next month or two.
And it probably won't be as drastic as people are hoping. It's been just inching.
I would say a quarter point, maybe a half point, but probably a quarter point. I see the Fed probably going a couple of quarter point drops, just to kind of ease back in because they dropped it too low before. And now
it's a very delicate game they're playing.
It is.
And so I get you don't want to mess with this too much. But what's interesting, Ken, is when it comes to real estate, people are going, well, Ken, if the rate went from 7 to 6, it would allow me to buy a house.
Yeah.